Keynesianism. Keynesianism. John Maynard Keynes was an economist who wrote after the Great Depression of the 30s, and his solution to the Depression of the 30s was that the state, through public works, would stimulate the economy by putting money into the economy. Big public works. That it gets people in work, gets money in circulation, it creates demand in the economy, and you get an upward cycle. If the economy is going down and you cut more out of it, you take demand out of it, then people can't buy things. If they can't buy things, then producers don't produce. So actually cutting at a time of recession deepens a recession. However, under the Stability and Growth Pact rules, it's not possible to deficit spend to get out of recession. So the EU not only backs the liberalisation policies that have got us where we are, they also back cuts which affect the poorest and actually deepen the cycle of recession. You would think then at a time of crisis we would want to review all of this and say, Jesus, this didn't do so well, did it? You know, maybe something better, something different. No. Everybody's more of the same. That's what Lisbon is. It's more of the same, except worse. Because Lisbon adds to the existing treaties the ability of the EU to have tighter control over governments who are in deficit and have tighter regulation on what states do. It actually adds to the situation where the liberalisation model is policed more closely. Where it also adds is in threats to public service of more privatisation. In order to understand a little article in Lisbon called Article 16, which has been amended, and depending on the numberings you'll get a different one, but say Article 16 of the first bit, the Treaty on European Union. This says that the EU has power to legislate so that governments will run public services in a way that meets their objectives. But they must do that in compliance with the treaties. Now this is 4 or 5 words that you think, jeez, it's obvious it's in compliance with the treaties. They wouldn't do anything else, would they? No. In compliance with the treaties. Well, you have to look back a little bit to what the European Court of Justice has recently ruled is meant by in compliance with the treaties. In 2006 there was for us Anoraks, quite a well-known ruling called the Watts ruling. This was a case in Britain where a person went to France for medical treatment and the British government didn't want to pay. The case was taken to the Court of Justice, and the Court of Justice ruled that the British government had to pay. But there was a lot came out of this ruling. And 2 of the things that came out of this ruling were this. On the one hand, any activity or any service where payment is involved, be that on behalf of a patient or client or within a department, within a government department, any service where payment is involved is an economic activity. It's an economic activity. And economic activities comes under the rules specific to business. I won't go through them, technical babble. If people want to look at this in detail, quite a detailed briefing on it here. There's some copies, or I can email you if you give me your email address afterwards. Once something is characterized as an economic activity, then it comes under internal market rules, which means that any private operator can bid to run it. So although the treaty says that public services are protected and they're highly valued and member states have the power to legislate to say what they should do, when it comes to delivery of the service, if it's an economic activity, then it must be opened to the market. Now this is privatization in a creeping way and by the back door. The treaty does not say, thou shalt privatize thy services. It doesn't say that. But it allows for it by the back door. And what we have seen here of multinational corporations increasingly taking over part of the services, they've taken over pharmacology, they've got ambulance services, they've got increasingly parts of the hospital services. We could change that by a change of government, reversing all that. However, if it's entrenched in a treaty with the provisions that are in this treaty and the case law of the Court of Justice, that's very difficult to change. Very, very difficult to change. Much bigger issue. What goes with that is a change in the treaty. It removes did Ed talk about vetoes or Sean? I can't remember. Somebody talked about vetoes. It removes the right of veto on international trade agreements at the World Trade Organization on health, education, and social services. Health, education, and social services. It also removes the veto on trade in audiovisual services and cultural services. Audiovisual services are TV, etc. Cultural services are libraries, museums, they could even be swimming pools, it could be community centres. Trade in these services, 2 minutes. Okay, trade in these services means allowing transnationals to come in and bid to run them for a profit. They don't trade in these things to provide you or I with a better service. They trade in them to make money. And the US has made this clear in its submission to the WTO. It says there's lots of opportunities in these areas. So, when you hear people say, you need to vote yes for the economy, the opposite is the case. A vote yes is more of the same. It's not a, let's have a think about this, it's not working very well, especially not working for the poor people. You know, especially not working for the poor people in Eastern Europe, and that's the big thing. That'll be the big thing about Eastern Europe and people moving here. That we are being pitched in competition, so that the poor here are in competition with the very poor there. That's the difficulty. And that's entrenched in Lisbon. Similarly entrenched in Lisbon are policies that preclude deficit spending in a recession. They stop doing that because you have too much of a debt. And when NAMA takes on this debt, the bulk of state debt will rise such that it'll be very difficult to spend on public services because there will be a load of state debt and the deficit will be ongoing. So there are policies that entrench competition, policies that entrench deflationary economic policy, and policies that directly threaten the provision of public services provided by the state for on the basis of universal availability, irrespective of ability to pay. What's in Lisbon is more of the same two-tier services. If you can pay, that's fine. If you can't, go on the waiting list. You know, go back there somewhere. You're around. Yeah. And if you die in the meantime, jeez, it's terrible. Everybody has to die sometime. So that's actually what it's about. This isn't scaremongering. It'll take you through it, you know, dot and comma. But if people say Lisbon is necessary for jobs, the opposite is the case. It makes matters worse. Thank you. Thank you.